Welcome back, everyone, to R2Kast number 58. Last week we were in Scotland, the week before we were in Canada, but today we're jumping back across the pond to the States to speak with Andrea Fleming. Andrea, would you like to say hello?
What's up? Hi.
Before we get on into another excellent episode of the R2Kast, I would just like to thank the sponsor for the show today, The Scottish Farmer. A weekly magazine highlighting everything you need to know regarding the Scottish agricultural industry, whether it's breaking news, events happening in the sector, market reports, classified ads, or just wholesome stories happening in the industry. The Scottish Farmer's got it for you.
So I think we can all agree, we've had a few in the past with really nice backgrounds. We've had Richard Cornick with Will Rubottom, and Andrea and I were speaking off camera, just how nice I was saying, she was very modest about it all, but how cow-themed her office background is. So it's a nice thing to look at for the rest of the podcast. Andrea, you may follow on Instagram and TikTok are the two main things I believe Andrea's on, as That Fit Advocate, which has taken me some time to manage to get my tongue around, and I'm surprised I managed to say it correctly that time, so that's a win. Andrea, could you tell us about where you're from, first off? We're obviously based in the UK. Where is it you're based in the States?
Yeah, of course. So I live in Southwest Minnesota. So if you're not familiar with geography, I am pretty much central northern United States, not far from Canada. So they're kind of my buddies. I'm on the bottom side of the state, but I farm in the very southwest corner of Minnesota with my family. So that's kind of where we hang out.
What's the States is so vast, and what's the sort of the weather like there for, well, tell us about winter, tell us about summer. I've got the reason I'm asking this is, in my head, is Minnesota one of those places that's freezing in the winter?
Yeah, it's miserable in the winter, but we also get really hot. So this last week, we had heat advisories. We were hitting 115 degree Fahrenheit real feel. And then we also go all the way to -50 real feel in the winter. So we go from freezing your face off with snow blasting at you, or it gets too cold to snow, to you walk outside and you feel like you're gonna melt. It's the best of both worlds, aka the worst of both worlds.
I mean, that's a ridiculous range.
It sucks, and it's hard on cattle, and it's hard on me, and it's just not fun. It's not great.
I think you've been brought up there your whole life, is that right?
Yeah.
So do you know of people that have came to where you are and had to get used to it? How do they deal with that?
So usually, I always when I travel, I'll ask somebody on the plane, where are you from? And we'll have a conversation, and it almost always resorts back to the weather. Because it's one thing to experience the hot humidity that we get in the summer. A lot of states also get that in the US, right? But then when they experience January, that is the worst thing. You wouldn't expect to walk outside if you're not from here and feel your face is being pelted off by wind. Because not only is it cold, we get excessive winds because it's so flat. So it'll be a little bit cold, and then it's miserable because we have winds that pelt everything against your face. So it's not great. We always talk about it, and they're I can handle summer heat, but the winter is usually what drives people away.
That's mental. I mean, I'm one of those ones that prefers the cold.
Me too.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm talking 0 and -4. It's. I mean, that's crazy. And just for you guys listening, for reference, for those of you that don't work in Fahrenheit, because I didn't, I just quickly had a Google. For centigrade or Celsius, that's about -45 to about 46. The figures you were saying. And we hit 41.2 in London. I'm not in London, but here in UK, in London, we hit 41.2, I think it was, about 2 weeks ago at the time of recording. And London was literally on fire. We're not cut out for this sort of thing. Houses were on fire, everything. It's quite interesting to see how different regions are cut out for different environments. And you guys are obviously dealing with it okay, and that you're still there. I believe you're 5th generation. Is that right?
Yep, I'm 5th generation.
So, I'm not on the farm anymore, but I'm technically 3rd generation if you class me. Most people wouldn't, but when I go back and do the lambings, I guess you could say I'm 3rd gen. But 5th is quite an extensive period, and I would say a lot more common in the States than it is in the UK.
Yeah, I would say pretty common.
When did that 1st generation start? When was that?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to think. So my dad is fourth. I want to say we were a century farm, so we celebrated 100 years in like 2013, 2014.
Right.
So sometime maybe like 2012, somewhere in that time frame. I was in high school, so one of those time frames. So I think we're at like 100 and between 105 to 110 years now, technically. So it was my like great great grandfather or great 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 grandfather. I'm really bad with that, but I finally asked my dad, and he had to do the math because it's just we haven't thought of like what generation we were. We just kept farming essentially.
For sure, yeah, for sure. It's one of those things that just happens. And then one day you think about it, oh yeah, we're one, we're two,
right.
or three.
Like he was like, your grandpa was this one, your great grandpa, and I was like, oh yeah. I had never thought to ask until I think this last fall. I was like, what generation am I? Because everyone started like talking about it. I was like,
yeah,
how far are we?
Who am I? Who am I?
Right. I know it's been 100 plus years, but like, what's the technical number? So,
has obviously the farm's changed over that period of time, but has it always been a similar sort of enterprise, maybe larger now?
So we kind of have always had a little bit of cattle and a little bit of crops. So things have really progressed more into the cattle in the last couple of years, especially since I came back home. I love cattle. Like if you can't tell, the cow themed office. And I didn't grow up doing a lot with the crops. So I am learning more about the crop side of operations because I have to be able to feed my cattle, right? And we have the ground. But I didn't do that. That wasn't my passion. So I was originally going to be a veterinarian. So I like cattle, livestock. That's where my happy place is. So we've always done both. But the last couple of years, we've grown into the cattle side of things because the land prices in the United States, I don't know if you're familiar with it, they are outrageous. It's hard to expand and get land right now without paying to the point that it's almost a dumb decision because it is so expensive right now. So we're actually like putting up a barn to feed more cows, doing that expansion wise instead of land. But I would say we always had like a smaller cow calf herd. It used to be like 50 or so when I was younger. And then we had like some bottle calves we fed out. We did dairy calves for a while, all that. But it's always been base crops and cattle. It's just now shifting to a little more cattle, feedlot, cow calf versus mainly crops. My dad's patience is very thin. So when it was just him, it was crops this way.
So a few things to sort of unlock there. You said land prices are through the roof. Now, I don't know if the reasons are the same, but here in the UK, everyone wants trees. Well, a lot of the people that have the land don't want trees, but powers that be and stuff like that want trees. That's the reason our land prices are flying through the roof. Is that the same for you guys, or?
I don't really hear much about like it being the trees. I think it's just the fact that people have had a lot more money from the last couple of years. We've had some different like issues, and they get like government payments and stuff. And whether you're on either side of that, this is what we're thinking is a lot of people paid off their debt. So now when people are selling out farms, it's family that's being broken down to from like the grandpa dies and then he has 4 grandkids. It gets divided in 4, so they wanted the most bang for the buck they can get. So that's driving land prices up. Plus, like the city expansion is growing, that prices are just getting so high. And where I live, if you ever heard of like Northwest Iowa, I'm very close to Northwest Iowa. It's very good black fertile dirt. It's really great for corn and soybeans, so the yields are very high. But honestly, I think it's kind of dumb how high land prices are because you can buy a little area of land and you're not going to be ahead for years upon years upon years. So I would say it's just development, and then the fact that people have money, so they're spending it. And it's a lot of like, we have different farmers in the area that are like trying to have more land than this farmer, and it just ends up being this big, I don't know. There's a lot, but it's not just like trees and stuff like that.
For sure, and it leans itself to that whole idea of factory farming. There's no connection between a stocksperson, their animals, that sort of thing, because only the elite can afford it, and so on and so forth. And certainly over here, and I think the one person I'm aware of in the States, actually quite a fan of the guy, is Bill Gates, is buying up a lot of ground as what will potentially be carbon credits. Now, I'm saying I'm a fan. I don't know if you guys are in the States, but
I don't know. It's not like, well, I'm not a fan of it because of what I know. And it's not good for like the farmer feeders or anybody that is a smaller operation. It's hard for us to grow and develop. And like my parents' farm right now, and I have a brother, but right now he's not interested. So with my husband and I trying to join in and expand, doing that is really hard. Like my husband and I cannot just go buy a quarter of land at all. and then try to, you know, have more cows or build a house or do anything. It's kind of pick your one route and you're stuck there for 30 years paying it off. That's the struggle right now. Plus we're in a drought and all the inputs are really high and it's just not ideal timing.
Yeah, well, not at all. And you're talking 30 years. The time you get, the age you get to before you can afford to buy that is probably 30. So you're finishing your working life by the time you're striking even. It's just, oh, that's pointless. Yeah.
And you're just passing it down, and then it's got issues, and yeah.
Yeah, we've been very positive about farming in the States here. It's funny we're talking about the States and the UK and whatnot. We spoke off camera, Andrea and myself, about the problems with time zones. Well, not problems with time zones, but maybe our inability to understand them. And we'd obviously, I think we're GMT +1 I'm in. I think that's how it works, because I don't know if you're the same, but we have a different time in the summer than we have in winter. Do you put clocks back and forward? Is that a thing?
So like fall, I think we fall back, and then spring we jump ahead, which is also confusing for me. So,
well, you've said that confidently. I can never say it confidently. I have to wait until everyone tells me what I'm doing that Sunday.
Usually I like have to see it on like Facebook, or like my mom will remind me, or my phone automatically switches. But we fall back because it's fall. It's the only reason I can remember that we fall back in fall.
That is a really good way to remember it, and I'm going to keep that one, because I've never been able to remember it. It's always my dad tells me, like you say, or now we don't really notice, because the next morning we wake up and either we're really tired or we're really well rested. Right. But we've managed today to meet at the right time. 7 o'clock for me, 1 o'clock for yourself. But 2 episodes ago, number 56 with Brian and Mandy in Canada, I was out running in bales at silage time, and they text me like, "Are you okay? Like, are you ready to go?" And I'm like, "Shit, I've got the wrong time off because of time zones." So, yeah, they do cause a problem, and yeah, but maybe they shouldn't cause a problem. Maybe we should just be able to understand them. But I certainly haven't yet. You mentioned you sort of, before you came home, and you mentioned that you wanted to be a vet. Never mind, say the word. Let's just go vet. Were you a vet, or did you just decide not to do that?
So I went to my undergrad, got my bachelor's degree in animal science, and I was the science specialization. So I did apply to vet school my first year. I did not get in, and then I applied a second year. I ended up pulling my application because I found my space back home farming with my family. In the middle of that, I was in feed sales for a little bit, but I didn't enjoy it, so I ended up quitting, and then I started sharing online. So I found this like passion that wasn't necessarily vet med, sharing online about agriculture and farming with my family. And I liked the, you know, a little bit of like the time freedom and flexibility I do have. Not that farming is flexible, but there's different seasons that I have more time for things like this, versus like harvest and calving. I'm like over there. And then I didn't have to go take on a whole bunch of debt to do something that I, you know, would have to be at a very set schedule, working all the time, not able to farm with my family. So at one of my lowest, I kind of like my lowest points in life, I found a passion for sharing online, which is something I did not do until I started doing it. So,
do you know, you've mentioned something there. You've actually mentioned 2 things that I really will follow up on. But see how you said at your lowest. I've followed you now for probably 2 or 3 weeks. I think I've been in touch with you. You're real. You know, it's not. I think some folk are guilty of, this is my Instagram and everything's perfect, which is not, because it just can't be. And I really like that about yourself, the fact that the stuff you post isn't just trying to pretend it's all sunshine and rainbows. I mean, you talk about the shit stuff in life, you talk about the low points, you talk, be that in farming, be that personal life, which is respectful in itself. But have you always done that? Have you always, because you've posted something like 2,500 posts on Instagram, which is massive amount. Is that realness always been there?
So I think, like, especially, I don't know if like social media is kind of toxic to different people in different countries, but I know like growing up, social media was a really toxic place for me. It was for like pretty pictures and pretty selfies. Like my Instagram is the same Instagram from like 5th grade, where it was like really cringy selfies and that's it. So for me, when I was like consuming social media, it was toxic. It was people that live these perfect lives and have like a really nice farmhouse that is always clean. And I was like, I don't know how these people have time for this, because I'm, you know, in knee deep shit, having like stressed out, running on 2 hours of sleep. Like, how is their life so perfect? And I found myself really like playing the comparison game to the point that what I was consuming was making me feel like absolute crap about myself. And that's not fun. And I went through a lot of bullying in high school and middle school, to the point that I kind of hid behind like this wall of fake Andrea. It wasn't like toxic fake, but it just wasn't me being me. Like, you didn't see the cow wall and the quirks and the weirdness and the like the random things I say and do and how much I love agriculture, because I got picked on for that. So finally, when I realized, hey, if I start sharing like the authentic, real me, there are people out there across the pond, all over the world, that are just like me and also went through the same thing. So I found a lot of like mental health relief and a little stress relief and a freeing feeling and just being me. Even if people don't love it, I'm like, bye, peace out, like you're not my person. But I've also created a lot of connections, and I think a lot of women also relate to that, because if you scroll social media, if you don't scroll my feed, you scroll like a whole bunch of other people, it's fake, it's perfect, it's only the good stuff. I don't want to be that person that makes, 13-year-old girl in middle school feel like crap about her life. I want her to be like, hey, I can live my real life too. So I would say since like 2018, 2019, I really started sharing, and that's when I got really real.
I think that's important. I mean, it's quite funny when you see folk that have their Instagram that they had when they were whatever, and now they have it still. Because I'm not going to go back to 2,500 photos, but if you go back, you're like, oh my god, this is the same person, and it's quite interesting because I've completely severed my old account, don't use it at all, but still have access to it. And this whole rural to kitchen one, I only follow folk like yourself, folk in the industry, folk in food and farming, all that sort of stuff. So I'm only seeing that stuff. But when I accidentally click back onto my old account, I'm like, oh my god, man, this is such a falsified world we're trying to portray here. I think us farming lot, shall we say, are probably better at just being real about it. Yes, there's the folk that pretend, but I think that's respectful. And you talked about, first off, sorry to hear you went through that as a kid. It's not. I think so many of us did, but I don't know if this is a fair assumption to make. But I mean, I was one of them, and I think there's a lot of people that went through that really tough stuff, and they were shy at school, and they were whatever, and their ways of coping with it, whether that was hiding behind a screen, whether that was whatever. But I seem to see they're the ones that do pretty well. Now,
it's got to be something of like, you hit your lowest and you come out of it. And I think like I went through my lowest points earlier than a lot of people go through them.
Yeah.
So, and it comes with like maturity and also being a farm kid, we know how to work and all that fun stuff. But I realized that like that lowest low, when I felt like absolute garbage and didn't want to continue my life, honestly, that's how low I was worth being around because of XYZ. I have interest in this, and sharing that found me the community that makes me feel grounded every single day.
But do you mind me asking, and say no if not, but what age were you when you felt you didn't want to continue life anymore?
I want to say like 14, 15.
But how sad is that? But I mean, like that, and I've heard so many people say that, I think 6 through like 14, maybe 13, 14 is that age that you should just be a kid. Like, life shouldn't matter. It should just be, I want to go out and play. And yes, that goes from playing on the swings to maybe going to the park and getting drunk, but that the fact that that's a thought at that age is so sad, and the strength of you to come through that and then try and change that for future 14-year-old Andrea is great and good to see, and I'm sure it's working. Because folk are going on and realizing that your life is really good, but also yes, shit stuff happens. So well, kudos for that. That's good to see. You mentioned about you started studying, you did your undergrad in animal science. Maybe this is, well, I know it's not a myth, but how bad is it for tuition fees in the States? We always hear horror stories over here. You're gritting your teeth, so maybe that answers the question. But
it's pretty bad depending where you go. So originally when I was in high school deciding between, so I'll just be real, Iowa State University versus South Dakota State University. There's a little bit of a driving distance for me, but the cost difference is very different going to Iowa versus SDSU. So I went to South Dakota State because it was cheaper. It was closer to home, and it's also where like my dad went, and I like the school a lot. So my cost actually there wasn't terrible because I applied for a ton of grants, a ton of scholarships, because when you're a farmer and you apply for FAFSA, which is what they call it in the US, they take your land as like equity. So you don't get any, like nothing, even if you have a little bit of land. You're like, cool, my parents are not going to pay for this, or like the land is not great versus inputs and stuff. So I applied for as many grants and scholarships as I could. And thankfully, my dad, since I was going to go to vet school, he saved up a lot to pay for my undergrad for me. In addition to my scholarships, which it wasn't a lot actually once it got down. Overachiever in high school, kind of paid off back then. But if you go to like out of state universities or any universities that cost more, there are students that come out with $120,000 at least in debt for 4 years. So I have my best friend is actually graduated vet school, and the amount of debt that she has from undergrad and vet school makes me want to like vomit. It's so bad.
It's a scary thing because it almost, first off, lucky for your situation, worked out well, but it almost elitifies education, which should never be the case. You know?
No, because like I went to animal science, like it is a ag-based degree, and I got done in 3 years, which also helped. But like, it wasn't crazy rocket science like engineering program. It was stuff that I can take into real life, and it still costs an arm and a leg. I can't imagine like if I would have gone across the country to a bigger school, how much I would have came out with, and then coming out graduating at 22, 23, getting a job that doesn't pay even like a quarter of that in a year. That's scary. Like you're paying your debt off till you're 40 years old.
It's wrong, and I almost feel bad showing you the comparison to what we have here in the UK, because I mean, and I'm Scotland in particular, which is arguably better because we have free tuition fees for 5 years. Yeah, exactly, and we then get a student loan on top of that to pay for things like bursary, just living costs, that sort of thing. And then I did my master's, and there was one girl from the States, and she was like, I'm 145 grand in debt after this year. And I'm like, oh my God, is it even worth it to do it? It's crazy. It's a shame that's, and is that a thing that looks like changing, or is it?
I don't know how they're going to change it. Like in the United States, like our healthcare system, especially for like pregnancy stuff, is not great, and just healthcare in general. And then our schooling program is not great. So I don't know how to fix either of them with how like our taxes and inflation and debt and everything is right now. Because during COVID, they tried to they wanted to forgive some student loans. They stopped interest, and I don't think forgiving them or making it free is a solution for us at all. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Because if you apply for like a ton of grants and stuff, it is possible to get it down, but not everybody ends up doing that. And it just, I don't like, sometimes you gotta be smart about where you go, but also if you want to go here really bad, do it. I just, coming out of school with a bachelor's degree and over $100,000 in debt is ridiculous. It's one thing if it's like 25,000 in debt. I mean, you can pay that off, within XYZ if you live frugally, but some of these kids coming out with just a basic bachelor's degree that then go on to get their master's that already have $100,000 in debt. That's the scary part.
It's scary. And you mentioned about sort of pregnancy related things there. I mean, the whole abortion thing in the last month has been shocking to see.
It's wild. Our country scares the crap out of me every single day, essentially. I'm like, not surprised what happens next. I'm like, well, here comes some more things that just, I have no idea what's happening anymore.
But I mean, I honestly, people listening to this that know me, like Wallace is talking about politics. He doesn't know anything about politics, and that's true. But I think, I'm not going to get into political opinions and whatnot, but I think your last president, certainly a lot of people this side of the pond were not a fan of, and I think your current president, more folk are a fan of, but it doesn't seem, from what I hear, things get better.
I think the issue, not to go into politics, but the United States is so you have to be this side or this side. Nobody meets in the middle, and that's our issue right now, is we're constantly flipping. So then whatever they reverse, they just reverse again. That's all we're doing every 4 to 8 years, and it's a mess. It sucks.
Well, that's a really good point, because assume it in your head as like a Venn diagram. You've got that tiny touch of the two parties, you're Republican and Democrats, whereas, for example, here you've got Conservative, Labour, Lib Dem, SNP, so there's, here, we don't need to get into politics, but I just wanted to ask about the tuition fees, because it's a shame, the word, I don't know, it's not easy anyway. You also mentioned earlier about when you were talking about applying for those, no, it wasn't when you were talking about that, but you mentioned earlier about sort of government payments for farmland. Mm-hmm. How does that work in the States? Because we have that here, but I assume it's different.
So it really depends upon like the industry, but basically there's like relief programs. So like we've had like a drought, or you have like crop insurance, and then during COVID they started giving out payments to farmers for, you know, reimbursing for prices that kind of sucked, or high input costs, and just there was all kinds of stuff that happened during COVID because it was something we've never experienced, right? So you apply for these programs and you got this chunk of money. Well, a lot of it ended up being a lot of money, and people paid off their debt. So like my mom is on a bank board, and they want loans really bad right now because everybody paid off their debt with these payments, which is awesome. But now everybody can go get more loans to buy XYZ with more stuff. Like a lot of people around us have brand new equipment again. They're building shops, they're building giant like barns, which is great. But then we got to turn the tables and end up the other way again. So those are kind of like unique government payment programs that came out, because like crop insurance has always been a thing, and then like drought relief, different stuff like that. It was just so much coming at one time from COVID that kind of got backlash, that it just kept coming all at once, and it was quite a bit of money, which is nice, but now
Sure.
it's like great.
So there's not a, like, for instance, the way it works here is you have this amount of land on these three qualities and you get paid this amount per quality. There's not something like that, no?
I mean, there might be, but I don't know a lot about like that specific stuff. I just know like the basics of what you can apply for, and then like certain natural disasters happen. But we had like PPP that came from COVID, and just more government things that you could just apply for. So then like your neighbor did, so then you did, because you're like, I'm not going to miss out on the money.
Oh, yeah.
It was just, I think it was too much. And then like Minnesota just did a drought program for last year because we were in a really bad drought, and it came out, and that's not even going to add up to anything. So I'm like, when we actually needed it, we're not getting it, because the drought last year was really bad in like central and northern Minnesota, and then also like North Dakota. So hay prices were excessive, and you were fencing and just everything. And we actually needed that. But then that ended up being like the people that applied, I think it was a couple $100 a person. Like it doesn't cover anything for
Pointless, yeah.
Like, right. It just, which Minnesota is not really a great like state right now for agriculture. So it's just, the government payment things are weird. I don't know.
Mentioned COVID a couple of times and how a lot of payments came from that. How has COVID impacted things in agriculture in the States, or has it not impacted things in agriculture in the States?
I think there's a big push right now for people to get direct to consumer, like beef and products in general. A lot of people are very interested in that, which is great. So you just have to have your meat like inspected to sell it, which is a challenge in some places because butchers closed down during COVID. And a lot of them are not inspected federally, so you can sell your meat. So like where we butcher, it's not federally inspected. It's just like for us, so we can sell like halves and wholes. But I have people, you know, I've wanted to sell beef, but we have to go somewhere else, and the dates are like a year back to get like packaged steaks and such. So that was great. And people started realizing that like ag is essential, because we had a big backlash. People were like, oh, we don't need agriculture. Agriculture is the devil. You know, greenhouse gases, cows are destroying the planet. Like that was a big pre-COVID thing. It's still a challenge, but people kind of realized, hey, we do need the food industry in the ag world. But I would say people just, they want food that they can count on. So they were much more of like direct to the farmer to get it. But now we have inflation and high prices, and now everyone's kind of freaking out again. And it's just, people don't even trust going to the grocery store anymore. I'm like, your food is still safe there, whether you get it at my house or you buy my beef when it ends up at the grocery store. So that kind of, it was good and bad. Like I'm kind of confused on what happened, but.
I saw your post about going to the grocery store last week or a few days ago. I thought it was quite good. I'd never even thought about people thinking that. It's a really good point. Well, that's the thing. You guys have got, well, we're God, I don't know how long, 20, well, half an hour in already. And I haven't even talked about the farm, which I will get into in a second. But the whole drought thing, right? We talked about weather at the start. How long can you be expecting to see drought? And that must be horrible to work with.
It's hard, and I feel guilty even talking about it because we just got rain this weekend finally. But we were looking at our corn, and our corn experienced a lot of stress early in the season because it was like 67 days or something without any moisture this year, and we had a really dry winter. So the issue is coming off these Midwest states is we're not getting a lot of snow, a lot of us. So that's a lot of our, like we should be really muddy in the spring, and this spring when we calved, I didn't fight mud at all. it was weird. It was fantastic at the time, but now you're like
For sure.
dry. But they say like it's always a cycle. Same with like how markets are and such. But Kansas right now is so bad. Oklahoma is bad. Texas is bad. People are selling cattle. Like our cold cow market right now is so saturated that prices are going to do all kinds of stuff. And we were set up at the beginning of the year to have record like fat cattle prices. So now I'm like, what is actually going to happen? It's just, I don't know. They expected that we'll be in like a drought-ish season for 5-6 years is kind of what I've heard and read, which is scary in itself. But they said that last year for North Dakota, and North Dakota has had a record rainfall and has grass up to like taller than their cows now. And last year they were starving their cows out almost. So I'm hoping that we shift back. But like south of us, a couple hours it's very dry. It's scary.
Yeah, the scary is the word. And when you're talking about 5 and 6 years, I mean, first off, impressive forecast.
I'm like, wow, do they really know? Like, I think it's all just going to be, we'll find out, I guess. But
for sure. But I mean, for reference though, 67 days. We have a hosepipe ban in this country at the minute, currently right now, and it's rained 3 days of the last week.
That's wild.
So, like, I mean, if here, drought is not a word we talk about here. It just it is not. Like, you can have the rain. Please take the rain. You know, like, no, I'm sure you're sitting there thinking, no, that's not how it is. But yeah, that's hard to work with. We have, however, been talking about your farm and the farming sector in the country and all this stuff, and we haven't actually talked about the farm. So, farming in Minnesota with cattle and crops. Well, first off, let's talk about cattle first. How is that cattle system run, and what breeds are you using?
So we are all like Black Angus based, a little bit of Simmental, because we do have like the cold weather, so they have to be very cold weather tolerable. So we run primarily a black herd. They're just commercial cows. We don't have like any crazy registered superior genetics. Everything that is born here goes directly from weaning kind of into our feedlot, so it'll never be sold. And then we do buy additional cattle to fill the feedlot. So that's a little different because not everybody in the US does that. A lot of people do cow-calf only, or they do the feedlot piece of it. We kind of do both, which Minnesota is kind of common to do that. But yeah, we have a couple like red cows. Otherwise, we keep them pretty uniform because you get more money for black cattle if you sell like black.
All right.
Yeah. But that's really kind of what we do now. So.
And tell us a bit about that, because I mean, well, funnily enough, most of my viewers are in the States. 76% of my viewers in the States, actually. Check. Yeah, I don't really know how.
I wouldn't expect that.
Yeah, I really don't know how, because I kind of really want to tap into UK market. No, I'm clearly in the UK market, but still a large. Well, that's not true. 78% of non-YouTube viewers are, so like Spotify, Apple Podcasts are all in the States. But for my UK listeners, the 3 of them, could you tell us about that feedlot system, because it's a thing that just doesn't happen here. Right.
So different operations are different. So right now we're actually building a barn that will have total confinement cows. But in the United States as a whole, cows are out on pasture. They're in the areas that you can't grow crops. So you think of like Nebraska, North Dakota, Wyoming, all the grass. You see the prairies. That's where your cows are at. Generally, they calve in the spring, somewhere between winter sometimes, January to April-ish or so. We calve a little bit later than some because of how terrible our winters are. You calve then, the cows stay with mom all the way through the summer. They're weaned in the fall, and at that point, they go into the backgrounding stage, which can be done a couple of different ways. Some calves will go out back on grass and graze. You essentially just want them to grow up instead of out. You don't want to get them fat at this point. You want to keep them kind of green is what we call them. So they can go into the feedlot transition really well. So us personally, our calves background in the lots. So they just wean directly into like the feedlot. They just are in the backgrounding phase. So they get a lot of forage. It's hay, essentially is what it is, and then some silage, not much corn. Other calves that we'll buy will end up on pasture for those 60 to 90 days, depending, sometimes it's longer, before they'll get sold to come into the feedlot. So then as they transition through that, they'll add more corn into their diet if it's grain-fed beef, and they'll be in the feedlot kind of throughout that phase. Some cattle, like I said, in the United States, they stay on grass until they're like a year. Sometimes a little over a year, and then they'll be in the feedlot only for like the last 90 to 150 days. Our cows, because of where we live, stay in the lots from weaning all the way to finishing, so pretty much a year. So kind of it depends.
So most are being slaughtered around that year stage?
They're right at a year and a half. Year and a half, 2 years. Yeah. So it's usually a year from weaning about ish, depending is when they'll kind of hit the score.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I thought you'd said a year, but I was like, that is young. But yeah, that makes sense.
Usually it's a year from weaning that they hit that. They're a year and a half. We average like 17 to 19 months or so with our cattle when they go in. So.
Right. Yeah. No, because in my head I was like, I know it's quicker than deer, but good God,
Yeah.
how are they managing this?
They'd be like short, fat, little chubby things that are like 3 feet tall. They want it out of year.
That's it. I like the idea of growing up, not out.
Yes.
I wish I'd done that as a teenager. Might have. Yeah, exactly. It might have reduced the bullying we spoke about earlier. Yeah. Do you guys use like growth regulating hormones? Is that a thing that you guys are using? Yeah.
So we do use implants in our operation. Not everybody does. There's kind of a push to not use implants a little bit in some, especially the direct to consumer. It's a marketing thing.
Sure.
I don't know. Are implants legal over in the UK? Are they?
No, they're not used here at all. No.
Oh, see, that's. I mean, you guys don't have a lot of like feedlot stuff either. You said so. I believe them. I like them a lot. They just have to be used properly. Like we just implanted our bottom half of the feedlot 50 days ago, so they are not clear to ship until mid-September or so when they hit the end of the implant. Otherwise, the meat isn't super marbled. It'll be like hot in a sense is what we call it.
Right.
But I believe in them because I think they're fantastic and they improve our efficiency.
So you said when used correctly, what do you mean by correctly? What is not correctly? What is correct?
Some people, there has to be a system. Like you have to have like which implant you're using and why you're using it. Because sometimes people will give a really hot implant at a very early stage, and then your cattle are not going to grow up. They're going to grow out.
Right.
They're going to have that same situation. And some people don't realize that if you implant a cow or steer or whatever, and then you process it 2 weeks later, your implant is not going to be any good. But if you don't wait a certain length, like there has to be a protocol in place. Because if you only give them one at the wrong time, it's not going to benefit you at all. It's not going to do any good. So there's different like hormone levels. We start at like a base level. They go to the not mediocre, but the medium one. And then they go to the higher level potency at the end. Otherwise, you're going to waste your money. You're not going to do any good. It's pointless, really.
So it's pardon my ignorance in this. It's just, we don't have it here. So and I'm sure quite a lot of the folk here will be interested in this because we hear about hormones. We don't really know. Well, we know what it does roughly, but will they mean you utilize protein better? Will they have better muscle growth? What is it they're intending on doing?
So essentially it's going to increase your rate of gain and the like rate that they're putting on the muscle and the marbling. So like the implant we just use is Revlar 200. It's a ending implant. It's higher potency that it helps them put on that marbling at the very end. It's a terminal implant essentially, versus in the beginning, it kind of just helps them grow the skeletal muscle. Because it has like you have your artificial synthetic hormones and you have like the actual hormones they put into them. So there's different combos and different implants. There's a lot on the market. But essentially it's just improving your feed efficiency and your rate of gain as they go.
And did you say Revlar 200?
Yes, Revlar 200 is the one we just gave. So that is one of the, like they have like Revlar IH, they have Revlar IS, there's steer specific hormones, there's heifer hormone implants, there's different ones, but Revlar 200 is a really common terminal implant, the final like 90-day push.
Well, I assume this, by the way, that's going to be the rabbit hole I'm going down tonight. I know what I'm looking at tonight. That sounds so sad, doesn't it? Interesting you say there's sort of different ones for steers than there is for heifers and that sort of thing, and that makes sense. I mean, even with humans, when, like, for example, the implant, that it plays with folk big time, it's going to cause a lot of problems there. So I've never looked, what you've told me is more than I've really known up to this point. You've been, well, you haven't been a vet, but you've sort of looked down that route before. What do you think from a welfare perspective of hormones, both for the animal and also for where I think the issue lies, the sort of public health thing, are hormones going into people's beef?
So as long as they're being used correctly and you're not, processing an animal that has had an implant for 30 days with very high levels, because they're slow releasing over time. So there's different pellets in the hormone that goes in and they slowly release. It's not all at once. But they've done studies and like the hormone difference between cattle that have had implants and cattle that have not it's like nothing. You're going to get more hormones in your food from eating certain vegetables than you will from beef. It's really kind of cool. But I've done a lot of like self-research, and then the university I went to does a lot of research with implants because they do a lot with the beef industry. So because of the research, and I'm very much a science nerd, I believe in them. I think they're safe and effective. And that's why like the US is number one in sustainability for beef. It's because of these technologies. And they've been around since like the 60s or 70s and been used all the time. So, and I've grown up on like hormone beef, implanted beef. I'm fine.
Yeah, are you okay? Yeah, you're fine. Yeah,
we're good.
Do you know it's funny that honestly this is going to sound like I'm instigating a UK-US battle here. It's not in the slightest. It's funny you say US is the highest sustainability beef in the world. That is not what we are told over here.
What in the world? I don't understand.
The reason for it is sort of looking at in the comparison between sort of the States, Brazil, and Argentina are always classified together for the use of feedlots, and the fact that here in the UK, forgetting what country I'm in, it's all sort of, it's not all grass fed, but there's this idea there's heavily grass fed, but you're just talking there that's the case for you guys. It's really just the finishing systems where we would have indoor sort of barley beef intensive units. You guys are having these outdoor feedlot systems. And now that when you really compare those differences, it's not really that different. It's quite interesting to hear from someone on the ground talking about it. And there's another thing that I want to talk about with yourself that's sort of that we don't have over here, and that's jumping over at the crop side with GMOs. But before we get into GMOs, could you tell us about actually one thing I forgot to ask? What sort of headage of cattle have you got? It's obviously going to be varied throughout different parts of the year, but roughly.
What was the question? Sorry, my internet was freaking out.
No, it's fine. What sort of headage of cattle? How many cattle have you got?
So right now we have cow calf right now we have 85 pairs. So they're out on pasture, and then we have 5 bulls that run with them. And then the feedlot varies depending on the year. We're a little bit fuller this year. I think we have like 325 on feed, with fat cattle shipping out any day. So that'll drop a little bit. And then the barn we are building is going to increase our herd to 160 head. So we'll have 240, 250 cows that are having babies every year.
It's gonna be a big change next year then.
Yeah, it's like tripling the herd, which is like making me really happy inside.
And yeah, no, exactly. It's just yourself, your mom, your dad, and your husband. Yeah, is that right?
Yep.
Well,
so my husband is actually a farrier, so he works like off the farm, does horseshoeing, and then my parents farm, and then I'm like over there as free labor, doing things, hanging out. So.
You get an office out of it.
Yeah, I mean, now that we're building the barn, I'll be over there way more and like in depth a lot, but it's very like seasonal. So like today I helped take a tire off and not much is happening. Dad's going to go rake hay. Otherwise it's a not busy season right now, essentially. Sure. There's stuff to do, but it's not like do or die stuff. So.
Which, yeah, I mean, you said that earlier. That can be one of the nice things about farming. You've got your mad intense 20-hour days for periods of time, and then you've got your let's go feed everything, then we're good.
Yep.
The reason I was asking about who was on the farm, will the sort of 3.5 of you be enough when that barn's finished?
Yeah, I think so, just because it will be seasonal and like I'm going to be fully committed to it. So between the goal of how the barn is going to be set up, it's total confinement and it's different individual pens in there with about 26 cows per pen. The goal is to have it so my mom and I can run it fully. Besides that, so we'll have to scrape daily, feed daily, and bed daily because it's a bed pack on the back. Otherwise, it's just calf checks, assisting with labor if needed, tagging calves. So the goal of that, it's kind of how it's been. It's just me and my mom doing the calving piece of it. My dad feeds, does planting and harvesting, and then we kind of just fill in wherever. And
feel free to laugh at me with this question because I'm still gauging exactly how it works. The whole idea with that sort of that barn. So do you have, well, you said calving, so you're block calving, I take it. So how does that system in the shed work? Is everything the same age or is everything going? I'm not fully following that part.
So I'm assuming this is what you're asking. We calve in like a 60-day window. That's the time we're going to have calves hitting the ground. So this last year it was like 75 days or so. But we're going to pull that down. It'll be a little bit longer for the next couple of years because we're moving our calving window ahead a couple months because of the barn. We have cover from the elements now. Otherwise, we calved in open lots. So you really try to avoid winter. So we'll calve like Valentine's Day-ish through April into May is kind of the goal. So all of the cows will be on the ground. If they're not in that time frame, we'll cull the cows unless they're like a very specific cow we want to keep or they're going to be terminal, depending on like the whole situation. Then they'll like be out and about, get weaned at the same time. Calves in the feedlot are all within about 60 days of each other. So that's a uniform group. So that way it'll be like just a whole bunch of stress for 60 to 75 days. After that, you can kind of just breathe a little bit. So
I have got you, and it's embarrassing that I asked that question because you'd already answered it for me.
You're good.
Yes, sorry about that. I've got like this little thing written down. I'm like, what part am I on?
I hope you've kicked your feet up and got comfy and enjoying another fantastic episode of the R2Kast with another really interesting guest. I would just like to quickly take another second to plug the sponsors of the show today, the Scottish Farmer, and I would strongly advise you to go out and pick one up this week and see even more of the fantastic people that are in our industry.
Yeah, so moving on to crop side, what area of crop have you got and what are you growing?
We are corn and soybeans and just a little bit of like alfalfa for the cows. Otherwise, that is the grain belts. We alternate every other year between soybeans and corn on the fields. We try to keep it 50-50 throughout the year, but the fields that are corn this year will be soybeans next year, go back to corn, flip-flop, keep it going.
And for those of you listening from the UK, corn is a confusing term. Corn means, corn is basic. I think the definition of corn is the most harvested crop in your area. So on Arran Island, I'm from an island in Scotland, it would be oats. Here, my dad always refers to oats as corn. I would say nowadays it's barley, but I assume you're referring to maize, which is the actual corn, the one that's
like
called
6 foot tall, giant corn plant, corn ear corn.
Yeah, for sure. I assumed that. And the thing, well, how many, I assume you'll talk in acres here, of that are you growing?
So we have about, okay, I'm trying to think. We lost a little bit of land this year. I think we have about 1,100 acres of cropland. So you'll take out 100 to 150 of that from hay. So I have 400 to 450, 500 acres of corn each year and then of soybeans. So they flip flop.
Right. Got you. And when is harvest for you? It's obviously going to differ for all those different crops. But
usually we start with, so corn is planted first, corn is harvested last. Beans is planted last, harvested first. I think I said that right. Yes. Yeah, so beans will be harvested. Usually it's like the week or two after my birthday, end of September, and then into October. Then we hit corn afterwards. Usually it's like a nice time frame. You just finish up beans, then you hit corn right away and you're done. We have silage chopping a little bit before that because that's before corn is completely dry. And then we plant like mid-February into early May, or not mid-February, mid-April into early May.
When are you cutting that grass? I assume you're getting a few cuts of it.
Yeah, so it depends on the year. Since we were really dry, we just switched alfalfa fields, and that field did not do super well in the first cutting. So that first cutting we had to cut because the weed pressure was really bad on it. We have a lot of just weed pressure in general up here. So the water hemp was really aggressive. So Dad cut that just a little bit early. We only got like 4 bales off of it. So that was not great. He just did second cutting. It's cut right now. It does look a lot better. So hopefully that goes well. And then he's hoping to get a third cutting probably early September, somewhere in that time frame, depending on how it goes. And then we have a big pasture we do cut. He only cuts that once a year just because it's 45 minutes down the road with the tractor and equipment. So
yeah, fair enough. And for those of you listening, just for reference, I don't know if I've already said this, but we're a week into August at the minute. So at the time recording, which is you're very much behind the UK in general, but you're maybe about 2 weeks behind the place I'm from, sort of the island, which is quite interesting actually. Certainly from a hay and well, we're mainly silage, but from that perspective. The thing I was really interested about on the crop side, we spoke about hormones earlier. I assume your maize and soybeans are GMO.
Yes, they are.
So that's not legal here. It's one thing. The hormone thing, I say I knew nothing about it before. That wasn't entirely true, but I think I was against it. I understand a lot of the things you're saying, but GMO I am so for. so far. I don't know why it's illegal here. Well, I do know why. It's the idea of Frankenstein food. So tell me about GMO. Could you guys work without it?
So you think about like how dry it's been. If we did not have GMOs right now, we would not have much of a crop at all, especially if you get just a little bit south of us. And our corn is stressed. We opened up those ears the other day and it's getting tipped back. So this much of like the tip doesn't have any corn on it. Mm-hmm. But because of the fact that we are drought resistant, we are a little more wind resistant. We've had some really bad like derecho windstorms come through, and it's amazing watching the corn lie flat, stand back up, and redo its kind of root system. But just with like the stress we have and being able to use different pesticides on it, having Roundup Ready corn is the best thing in the entire world. I'm pretty sure Roundup is illegal in the UK as well.
No, it's not. But I would be very surprised if it's not in 2 years' time. It's becoming illegal, yeah.
Right. So being able to use that and just having drought-resistant plants and like pest resistance, we have grasshoppers really bad when droughts hit. Having plants that can be a little resistant to different things is huge, especially from at the standpoint of we don't have to spray our crops as much. We don't have to do as much tillage sometimes because of GMOs. It's just, especially with the droughts right now, you guys don't have that, but we're still going to have a decent crop, even with a lack of rain, because of choosing drought-resistant seed.
It's quite drought-resistant seed's insane to me. Like, I mean, like, how do they do that?
Right.
You know, it's so cool. You can basically make this organism that requires water not require water. Yes, it requires water, but you know what I mean. Like, it's quite something, and I think it's important that people over here that think GMO is Frankenstein foods, is putting, you know, fish in tomatoes is the famous one. They generally spoke to someone that thought that there was fish in tomatoes. You know, like, well,
right, and like
exactly what that exactly.
Only a certain amount of crops in the world that are GMOs. Like most, so like food labeling in the United States is ridiculous. Everything that is like non-GMO, they slap a sticker on it, even if it could not be a GMO, because we only have like 10 GMO crops right now. People are like, oh, this is GMO, like GMO-free oranges. Oranges are not a GMO crop. They've not been mixed with. They don't need it, right? Corn, those type of ones, yes, but a lot of it's the stuff that humans don't actually consume as well. So like field corn, nobody eats that around here. The cattle do, or it goes to ethanol. So
it's such a good point. Non-GMO oranges is like saying this is a vegan banana.
Like the marketing, I don't know if marketing is so bad over there too, but it's ridiculous how confused consumers are because of the labels they slap on things now.
I mean, it's not great, but I don't think it's that bad. I mean, that's pretty silly, because it's not false advertising, because it's correct, but it's one of those things. It's almost like, what is it? It's like curved teaching or whatever. There's a name for it. It's like, yes, this is non-GMO, but it had to be. It's a good point. So that's not helpful. It's
all fear-based. They're trying to get the fear in the consumer, so they purchase XYZ for more money, or to believe that, you know, conventional is the devil or certain things are not safe, when really we have like the safest food supply in the world, and people are terrified because it doesn't have a certain label on it.
And yeah, the fear-mongering thing of consumers is a shame, because we have, you know, whatever product it is, whether it's a steak from a Highland cow that's been on the hill in Scotland, or it's a sweet corn on the cob from where you are, it doesn't matter. For the most part, 99% of farmers are producing what they can so that we feed the planet, so that we feed what's going to be 8 billion in January next year. We're not trying to kill everyone. And that whole consumerism, the supermarkets really don't help that fight, it must be said. But yes, so without GMO, you guys couldn't do it. Is that in the soybeans as well, Andrea? Yeah.
Most of them are all like GMOs around here, especially just because of we're all conventional in the area, and to increase yields on really fertile ground, the amount of like that's happening because of GMOs is amazing. And that's how we're going to meet the demand, is because of GMOs. It's not only fighting off drought and pests and allowing us to use some insecticides and stuff, but it's also improving those yields, that we're getting more food out of less acres every single year.
Yeah, and unless they take that away, then you're just losing this basket of food from the middle of America. Yeah, it's got to be there. Yep. I'm glad that we agree on that one.
I figured I was like GMO controversy, but yeah.
No, honestly, GMO has been a thing. I had a mate that worked in the States. He worked for Hoffman Harvesting, who you may or may not have heard of. From what I understand, basically a harvesting contracting company that basically go from Texas to Canada. That's basically their summer. And he was pro GMO, and he was sort of 25 when I was starting uni, when I was 17. And I was like, GMO, that's bad, this sort of thing. And he talked about it. It wasn't part of our education because it's not over here, but yeah, no, I've always been pro, or certainly tenuously pro, very much pro gene editing as well, which is slightly different, but we don't need to get into all the differences. For those of you listening, the difference between GMO, which is genetic modification, and gene editing. Genetic modification is the integration of a foreign gene. Gene editing is the deletion or movement of genes within a similar substance. But we're not getting into that. that would take another half hour. But yeah. What was the thing I was going to say? It was relating to GMO. Maybe I can't remember. I love seeing sort of systems in different places. You know, we've had people in all over the UK. I've had folk in Canada. I've had folk in. It was a cranberry farm. I don't know if I mentioned that we had 2 weeks ago in Canada, which was quite interesting. Obviously in the States now, I've had different people in the States. One who you're in the YouTube game, which we'll get into in a minute. You might have heard of The Farmer's Life. Yeah, so I had him on, which was a massive get right at the start of the podcast. There's 100,000 followers on Facebook, you know, and here in different systems the world over, and I think we're all quite guilty of wherever we are of saying we're better, they're rubbish. Yeah, and I often say, I'll be honest, I've came out and said that I think welfare standards are better here than they are in some countries, and whatever. I have said that, and I also push this constant message that we work for what we have there. You know, your system wouldn't work here. My system, he says, without a system, wouldn't work where you are, you know. And I think it's good that we see all these different things. So yeah, it's been really cool to sort of hear what's there. But from the one last question on the crop side is, I'm sure I've got some folk, and maybe you don't know the answer to this. You said it was more your dad that did this, but what combine have you got? People love that question.
It's a Case IH. I know that. It's red. Other than that, I have no idea what it is. We're all red.
There we are. There we are. Some people love it. So I've got a few like listeners that have kids that listen, and I've had a few messages on Instagram like, Wallace, you spoke about their farm, and Stephen wanted to know what combine they had.
What tractors do they have?
Yeah, exactly. So Stephen, if you're listening, Stephen's a fake name, but we'll go with it. It was red. Yeah, away from the farm. The reason I originally got in touch with you was through Instagram, and you've got social media. You've got Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Is that right? Do you do Facebook, or have you avoided it?
Yeah, I have a Facebook page too. I have all of them.
All of them, yeah. How many followers do you have on Facebook? Just out of interest.
That one's not very big because I kind of like had it years ago, and then I stopped using it because Facebook like pages really didn't do anything for a couple of years, and now they're working. So I think there's like 2,000 over there. It's not great. I just kind of reshare stuff because I already make the content, so it's just easy to over there.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's funny. I'm the opposite. My Facebook's, I mean, I don't have nearly the following you do, but my Facebook's something like 5,000. No, 4,000? Oh, I don't know, but it's the biggest one I have. But it's dead these days. But we don't need to get into social media analytics and all that. But what made you start? You mentioned, you touched on this earlier, but what made you start posting online and talking about farming online? And also, why the name? Because I can't say it.
I know. So back in 2018, when I hit one of my lowest points outside of like when I was 14, when I didn't get into vet school, I was went downhill. It was also when I turned 21, which is a legal age that you can drink in the United States. And I turned to a very negative coping mechanism. So I was into health and fitness. My first year of college, I got into it, and I fell out of that when I lost myself for a couple months. So January 1st, 2018, I made a promise to myself, typical New Year's resolution, that I was going to prioritize my health again, because if I don't take care of my health, my mental health is trash. I skip class. It's just not great. So I started sharing online for my fitness journey to hold myself accountable first. And as I started sharing that, I would go home on the weekends and I'd share calving season. And I realized a lot of people were finding my page that I had no idea who they were. Because prior to this, my social media was like people I actually knew, right? Like classmates and friends and 4-H friends and all that fun stuff. So I found these other people that were interested and they were asking questions. And I also had people that like loved that. So I had, consumers or people that weren't in ag asking questions. And I had people that related to my cow love and obsession. So I started sharing more. So eventually I became known as the That Fit advocate, because fitness is a big part of my life. And then I was advocating for agriculture. So it's kind of taken a shift because I was a health and fitness coach for a while and I took a step back and I'm not doing that anymore. Now it's just like content creation, sharing about farming. Really, that's what I do now. And I contemplated changing my handle, but I like being that brand. It's kind of how people know me and it's uniform across platforms. And I'm like, people are like, well, I don't even know what your first name is. And I'm like, well, you can figure it out. As long as you know that I love agriculture and I like fitness, we're good to go on that whole wavelength. And fitness is always going to be a part of who I am, even if I'm not a coach necessarily. Like I worked out before I got on this call and put myself together in like 10 minutes because that's how I handle my mental health. So that's kind of where it started. But it wasn't like I'm going to go tell the world about agriculture. It was just, I'm sharing a little bit. I started finding these people before the algorithm went like chaotic and now it's confusing and stuff. Like people would just see your stuff, right? And we grew from there and it was only on Instagram. And then I created a Facebook like page. Then I went on TikTok during COVID because what else were you going to do during COVID?
What everyone done.
Right. And I started YouTube recently because I wanted to make longer form content with like a series. Like I'm doing a calf to plate series right now, following a calf all the way from the moment it's born to the moment it leaves on a trailer to go become beef. And kind of just wanted to like get into that ballpark a little bit. So, because sometimes I like have ideas and things I want to share, but Instagram has a limit of like 60 seconds or whatever. And it's hard to fully explain versus a YouTube. So
it's, first off, I wouldn't change your name. Like, I mean,
I don't think I'm going to.
No, I'd keep it because I'm kind of similar. I mean, some folks say Royalty Kitchen's a bit shit, and fair enough, maybe it is. But I don't know. It's what I am now. Right. Much like you probably are as well.
Been my identity for 4 years, and I went to a business retreat, and we were talking about like New Mexico Milkmaid. I don't know if you know who she is.
Yeah, I've heard of her.
She changed her handle a couple months ago, and she's like, I felt like I had an identity crisis, but she did it. And we just kind of had a conversation and I thought I was going to, and then I was launching apparel and I was doing all these things. And I was like, people can figure out my first name. If they know of me as like That Fit advocate versus Andrea, I'm okay with that. Like, yeah. They know who I am. Right. So I kept it and I'm okay with it because everything is branded like that. So it's just.
Yeah, well, that's it. I think I said to you at the start, I don't really watch much stuff. The stuff I probably watch is just mindless YouTube. Because I need to switch off sometimes, and I quite enjoy that. And I watch like Q&As with YouTubers and stuff. And I watch this guy. He's a football YouTuber here and like soccer YouTuber here in the UK. And his girlfriend, one of the questions she has is, "What would a tip be for someone starting social media now?" And he's like, "Use your own name." And so like, well, it's currently Andrea Fleming, whatever. And I was like, oh shit, maybe I've done this wrong. But like, that's almost my online name now. Like people know I'm Wallace, people know you're Andrea, but like it's a thing. I feel like it's easier to brand. Like I could never write Wallace Curry on a shirt. I'm never going to do that. But
I know
it's much easier to do the sort of like you're talking about the apparel there. Yeah, so it's that transition of I'm making a TikTok, so I'm holding it this way, and then now I'm making YouTube, so I'm holding it this way is quite fun.
It's stressful. Like I'll like snap something really quick. Like we bedded cattle this morning, and I was like, "Cool, get it like on camera." And I was like, "Cool, it's up and down for Instagram." Now, if I wanted to convert this to YouTube, I need to like. So I bought a camera that'll shoot landscapes, so I can shoot at the same time and figure it out. Because I realized that the YouTube audience, if it's not this way, they get angry about it.
So my thing that I do is shoot landscape on 0.5 zoom, so you can then crop it and get a perfect portrait as well. What I started doing, because I mean YouTube, I only really post this stuff on it, but I've been added into lots of different committees as like the video guy, which is a shame because I'm not a video guy, but I've been added to these things. I've got this phone, I've got this iPad, and what I was doing was I was walking around with a tripod and I was like filming something like this, And then, right, okay, I've got that, right, go back, and then go like this, and so I could work with both. And I'm like, this is not sustainable. There's got to be an easy way.
I know, and like 4 years of me going like this, now I have to remember to like also go like this. It's just confusing. So
it is. I love that idea though. That following the calf plate. That's cool. People, you're in for a absolute whirlwind of comments when you get to the plate stage. By the way,
I'm waiting for like that video to take off, and it's gonna be chaotic because everyone's like, it just takes one video all of a sudden to like get traction, and then your channel is like huge. Which right now we're like 123 subscribers or something. So I was like, yeah.
I think it was actually 126 because I just checked. Oh, so you've flown up today. Yeah. I think the YouTube we talked about algorithms is the interesting one. I mean, you've probably heard of Sandy Brock. So a good mate of mine, Cammy Wilson, is the sheep game over here, and he's by far the fastest farming growing YouTuber in the country. And now he's on like the main farming TV show. He's a presenter on that. It's just flown up. But he was on about 8K subs, so doing really well. But then Sandy shouted him out, and like I was watching it, he was at 14 in like 3 days. Like it takes something to happen, and then but there's a lot of work in it.
Right. Oh my gosh. I thought it would be like super simple because I already have the content and I'm making content all the time, but editing YouTube videos and getting enough content to explain is still a struggle for me.
Yeah.
Beyond anything. So
and it's what you say, you've got the content. It's weird how different that content is. TikTok is let's have a laugh, let's be daft. Instagram reels are the same. And then YouTube is like, like you're making a series. It's quite fun.
Time consuming, but it's also great. So I told myself it'll be worth it. As much as I hate it, some moments I'm like, it'll be worth it, I promise.
Yeah, but I'm sure you hate it, but it's also great. You wouldn't be doing it if you didn't enjoy it, I assume. Just out of interest, what do you use to edit videos?
I was using my phone to edit. That was great because I'm always just on my phone. It's easy for me to do it kind of in a little pocket. So I had an app that I was using. It was like Video Rama or something. I've used it for years for anything. And I just started using iMovie on my MacBook because I was like, I can airdrop everything, move it over, and it's really easy. I just had to actually like sit down and make it happen. So,
well, the reason I asked is I noticed you had an iPhone. I do all of mine basically whatever I filmed it on. If I filmed it on the iPad or filmed it on the iPhone, I haven't got any editing software on my MacBook. So I use LumaFusion. It's check it out. It's like a one-off payment. I think it's like, I don't know, probably be like $35. I think it's 20 something pounds. But it's just about advanced as there is behind Premiere Pro. It's not Premiere Pro, but you don't need Premiere Pro. Like it's way too advanced. So I mainly use that, and then use an app called Epidemic Sound for royalty-free music on YouTube, because obviously I'll get copyright banned and that sort of thing. You mentioned apparel. You've got quite a cool little apparel company. One of my favorite ones I've seen is Eat Real Beef, Drink Real Milk, and what is it? Have a Good Life. I think. I think that's class. So, how did that come about, and is it going quite well?
So I just launched it probably like a week and a half ago or so. So I partnered with Kaz Gear. So they handle everything for me. So if you've heard of like the New York Farm Girls or
oh, definitely,
yeah. This is who they get there. Yeah.
Right.
So they work with them as well. So I reached out to Kaz Gear and I was like, hey, I wanted to do this for a while, but I didn't want to house all the apparel or like have it here or ship it because right now it's fine. But until I get to like busy season, I don't want to be shipping orders at 2:00 in the morning when I'm like running on no sleep. So worked with them, created some designs and got it launched. And it's great because they handle all of that. I do everything like talking about it, promoting it, and it's fun. So just have 3 designs, and then if this goes well, I get to do like non-apparel items. Like 7 Bar Ranch has like coffee, or there's like ear tags and all kinds of fun stuff. Like more. So, and hats and stuff. So, but yeah, it's nice because they do all of it for me, really. Besides talking about it. So.
Yeah, well, you're working to your skill and their skill, definitely. I think you've just moved a tiny bit to the side from where you were before. We'll be able to get any of those cowboy-looking hats that we see in the background.
Yeah.
Oh my god, there is. Yeah, you'd have to try all of them now as for the apparel. That'd be good fun. I always like to ask folk that have sort of an online following. It's quite funny, over here. The absolutely massive agricultural Instagrams are like 10 and 15k, and if you're getting bigger than that, it's huge over here. But I notice in the States there's quite a lot at that size, and I think you're 30 something from what is it?
It's like 33 or somewhere in that range, 30, 33, 34, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Does that, you obviously said, you looked to get into veterinary, you've now come back to farm, you're sort of easing in once this barn's there, you'll be full time. You're obviously full time at the minute, but really full time then. Does that help on the side?
I think yes. So there's a lot, like, since Instagram Reels came to the front of everything, there's a lot of accounts that have blown up because of them. Because if you have a couple go viral, then your following can grow massively. This fall I had one blow up and I gained like 8,000 followers in like 7 days. Like, all it takes is some Reels. Sometimes they're not, like, I deleted a lot of people because it wasn't the right people. But once you have that, like, monetizing social media is really great. You just have to have a certain benchmark and a certain community to make it happen. But I always felt like I was like super awesome for having like 15,000. And now I feel like everybody has like 30 to 40. It's just, we kind of all grew together, and it's scary how fast you can grow. And then like, you'll be stuck somewhere for forever. And all of a sudden you'll shoot up again. It's weird, but yeah, I'd say getting to 30 was kind of the point that I could monetize. And then TikTok is different and all that fun stuff.
I mean, TikTok itself isn't monetizable for views. I mean, there's a guy over here, KSI, who you may or may not have heard of. The whole KSI Logan Paul fight was the like vlog YouTuber thing that happened, but he's probably the biggest YouTuber. I mean, not agriculture at all, just YouTuber in the UK. And he makes something like $2,000 a month from TikTok, and he's the biggest one in the country. So it's like, it's not making major money.
I've made like $200 from the TikTok creator fund. It's like nothing.
Yeah.
But the brand partnerships and then like apparel and those things that come is much better. Like, I've made more on Instagram with like the Reels bonus than I ever have on TikTok.
Yeah. So they're almost like tools to then promote. So you've got to do more than the content. You've got to then create something for folk to jump into. Which you've obviously just done, and fair play to you for it. Do you enjoy the whole TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram grind?
I really, like, if I had to pick one or was only allowed to do one, I would stay on Instagram fully. That's my favorite one of all of them. I love being on like stories and stuff because I feel like that's really how I've like built the connections and being my weird self. Like, before this, I was like, I just got ready from Hot Mess Express. Sorry, my Alexa was talking to me.
No,
to like ready to go. Like, that's just where I'm my quirky self. TikTok is weird because it's like you put effort into content and nothing happens, and then you post something in like 10 seconds and it blows up, and I'm like, I don't understand. And then YouTube, I'm kind of just hanging out and waiting. So if I had to pick one though, I would be on Instagram. As much as it's making me mad right now with the algorithm, I just really like stories, and my community there, like my women in ag community there, is the best thing in the entire world.
Great, I love to hear that, because like I feel like there's this ag community thing. I speak about it on the R2Kast quite often, and everyone's so supportive of each other. You know, like I've even got a few folk in the States now started speaking to yourself. I'll be another person. You meet all these folk, and it's great. It's quite enjoyable, and I think I enjoy making TikToks because it is just stupid. But like you say, I can put a bit of effort into one. I actually edit it, then I'll put some good music. Oh, that music doesn't work. And then I got like 2 likes, and then not 2, but you know what I mean. And then you put something out, it's like some daft video your face or whatever, and then it gets like 500. They're like, what's happened? Why is this happening?
I feel like I keep it much more like professional on Instagram, and then like TikTok, I'm like, I don't really give a crap today. So this is like, that's kind of my difference. I'm like, if you want to see the real and raw Andrea and stories all the time, go watch my TikToks, because I like do not give a crap over there really. So.
Yeah, and then I've got like a Snapchat where I've only got friends on it, and that's where like it better never get shared, you know. Like,
right.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's a cool space, and glad you're sort of finding your way through it and jumping into YouTube. Maybe you'll be the next YouTube star of the next. I
just hope that I can just like educate in long form content, monetize a little bit over there, and hang out.
Yeah, for sure.
Like just sharing especially with calving season, it'll help too, of like content like this is what I did today. Right now I feel like it's a little slow of what's happening because I'm doing more of this. But yeah, it'll be fun. So
no, I'm sure it will be. And it is a bit of a grind. I mean, my YouTube's now 18 months old. It's at about 1.1k subs, so it's just monetized. I'm averaging about 3,500 views roughly a week, and it's made about 40 quid, so it's not not massive either, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
It's something. It's extra. Something you wouldn't have otherwise.
Exactly. And in fairness, I haven't actually been able to claim that yet because I still haven't set up all the stuff. So it's just sitting there. I'll try and build it up until it's like I need money. Then I'll set this up.
Right.
No, it's been really cool to chat. I love getting folk from a different country. Always enjoy it. And yeah, someone who's really not travelled. Just given when I finished uni and then COVID and all that, it's really interesting to hear different stories. But there's 2 questions I ask everyone before we finish. One of which, by the way, this has flown by. It's been 1 hour and 15 minutes. I did not realise that. I was really good at it. Obviously got deep into hormones and GMO. First off, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And secondly, if you had any tips for folk coming into farming, what would they be?
Where do I see myself in 5 years? The goal is to be doing a lot more at the farm and hopefully taking over the cattle side of things to the point that my husband and I own the cattle. Especially just the cows is probably the goal. And hopefully we are doing a little bit more of the crops ourselves is the goal. We got to take that away from my dad's hands a little bit. And he wants to, he just doesn't want to give up the control a little bit. So that's the goal. Hopefully kind of monetizing more and just having the social media platforms so I don't have to do all of them. I'm hoping to have 1 or 2 main ones and kind of stick there. That way I'm not everywhere and stressed out in multiple ways. And hopefully doing some more speaking engagements because I really like speaking and traveling. So hopefully more of that. But definitely I just see myself farming a lot more and being more hands-on in the trenches more a little bit. And then top tips if you're coming into farming. Do not be afraid to ask questions. And if you want to document it from day one, document it from day one. You're going to feel like you don't know anything. You're going to feel like you're an idiot, but that is the way you're going to grow and you're going to learn. And if you take time to ask the questions of people doing the things already, you can learn a lot and know that there's no one size fits all one way to do anything. We have a big like no-till versus, like GMO, non-GMO, conventional versus organic, all that regenerative ag, conventional. There's lots of different routes. So follow what you choose to do, but don't be afraid to learn and have fun doing it.
Very good points. And I think, you mentioned it, don't feel like an idiot. It's a shame that that's even a thing because, people don't go into making pizzas and they start the first day like, I feel like an idiot because I don't know how to make a pizza. We have this massive industry and there's this weird stigma that you must know everything when you're 12.
Anything. Like I learn every single day. Like it comes to crops, I'm like the biggest dummy out here. But I'm learning. And that's what I give myself credit for, right? Like it's the little things you're going to learn every single day that are going to compound to you feeling confident in what you do.
Absolutely. I don't know if I've actually said to you, I think I might have said it in the message I originally got in touch with you with, but I'm an agricultural lecturer. And I think I make a point of making it over to students that I do not know everything. Mm-hmm. And I come on this podcast and there's been 2 or 3 things we've spoke about I knew very little about. Like it's a massive learning curve where, you and I don't know your age, Andrea, but I'm 25. We're clearly not old. And you can't know everything. So it's a really good one. And it's actually reminded me of one thing I meant to ask you that I've just lost in this abyss of words that I plan on asking. You speak. You're a speaker. Could you tell us about that?
It's actually kind of new. It's not something I ever saw myself doing. Like I took speech class in high school and college, and I thought it was the worst thing in the world, but it was on topics that I didn't enjoy. But I spoke at a Wisconsin beef tour about advocating for the beef industry online. And that is like my passion, happy place is talking to people about how to start sharing or how to combat, myths or issues we're having. Especially because like when you do something that you love, it doesn't feel like work. So I could go do this in front of a crowd and I'd be happier than anything. So that's kind of where that's at. But if I can talk about cows or agriculture in general, or my mental health story, I'm pretty proud of that as well. I'm talking to some different FFA chapters and such about growing up and not fitting in and then going through all that. That's kind of my newest little thing that I've been doing. It's just hard to, usually they're in like the busy seasons, so to do the speaking events is a little bit of a challenge sometimes.
Well, it feels wrong to say this, but for having allowed you to speak about cows for an hour and a half and speaking about your mental health story, do you feel like I should say you're welcome? Speaking is amazing. Like you say, as a kid, good God, could I think of anything worse? Not at all.
Oh,
But I get
right.
asked yeah, exactly. I get asked to sort of come to speak as entertainment, but also speak as like real to a point at a local young farmers thing. It's just great fun. Like you have this idea in your head, for anyone listening that maybe has been offered to speak at something or whatever, that everyone there wants you to fail. That's just not the case. They're there to have dinner. They're already well oiled. They want to have a giggle, and you can be the person to make that. So yeah, it's great, and that sounds brilliant. So hopefully now that I follow you and haven't done for prior to 2 or 3 weeks ago, start to see more of that. That'll be good. I hope for those of you listening that you've really enjoyed Andrea's story. I certainly have. Next week we're coming very much closer to home, back to Ayrshire with the Wee Brown Hens, and I'll give you a little heads up for R2Kast 59. It was the night before our local agricultural show, and Gordon and Maria, who are the Wee Brown Hens, said they would quite like to film it in my kitchen, which was a good idea because it was really real. It was interesting to sit alongside the table with them. But as I said, it was the night before our agricultural show and there was a lot of whiskey nearby. So number 59 is quite entertaining. It's about an hour and 40 minutes. I wouldn't go as far as saying, oh, I was drunk, but we'd certainly been a wee bit tipsy. We've been trying our sort of local Queen liqueur. So yeah, it was a good laugh. So we'll see you for number 59. Andrea, it's been an absolute pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
It's been a lot of fun. It's absolutely flown by. It's been a really interesting chat, as most of the R2Kasts are, and hopefully we'll keep in touch.
Of course.
Good. Speak to you later on and see you all for number 59.
Well, that's it. Another R2Kast finished. Another agricultural mind opened up. And I would just like to say that getting these guests on board, it does take time, and it always has done. But I've now went weekly, and with that comes even more time required. And I would just like to finally thank once more the Scottish Farmer for sponsoring the show and making that much more possible. Please be sure to get in touch if you've any ideas of people you'd like to see on the podcast, or maybe ideas you have for me presenting better, because I definitely do require that. See you in the next one.